Collections don't have to feel like a battlefield, and they don't have to hurt your patient relationships either.
You've probably heard about a situation like this or lived it if you're in the office at the front. A patient gets a bill, feels blindsided. Suddenly, you're not just their dental office. You're not their trusted care provider. You're the enemy. Today, we're talking about how to avoid becoming the villain in your own practice narrative.
And I've probably said this 100 times. LaRae has heard me say this a million times to our staff, to our clients, to literally anybody who will listen to me. People are not surprised that dentistry costs money or that it's expensive or that they're going to be paying money for it. People are usually willing to pay money for quality dental work, right? I mean, especially when they're in pain. They want a skilled professional to stick their fingers in their mouth. I mean, they do. Typically patients are reasonable human beings. Patients get upset when there is a surprise involved in a balance. They get upset when remaining patient portions are a surprise and they just feel like they haven't been told, or some part of the balance explanation process, there's been some kind of breakdown. Like, that's when we run into trouble. So on today's podcast, we are going to talk about how to manage patient expectations and balances without resentment and ill will.
Welcome to the Truth Decay Podcast, talking dollars and cents with Sara Baker and LaRae McMullen.
And on today's episode, it's all about how to manage final patient balances and do AR follow-up in a way that protects both your cash flow and your relationships. LaRae, literally, like, what's the problem with collections? Like, why can't people collect stuff, honestly?
That's a huge question, right? That's the question.
Yeah.
For the purposes of our conversation today, we want to talk about how a lack of systems in offices either avoid collections or go too hard and die on the hill that might not be the best fight to fight. Both of these extremes result in big, messy ARs, huge problems, and confused, alienated patients.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's either avoid it altogether, right? Or aggressively go after people to the point where we're being told to send statements for 10-cent balances, right? And when that happens...
People who haven't been in for 6 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're dying, like you just said, you're dying on these hills that your time and attention and resources probably shouldn't be on these. It should be focused maybe on the system that got you to this place, right? So it's just sort of putting your energy and your attention maybe on something that's a little less uncomfortable than examining the process that brought you here, right? So I think the most common reason for these sort of misguided, disorganized approaches to collections is the emotional discomfort and the conversations about money, right? I think that most offices kind of consider themselves caregivers and not collectors, which makes sense. And I can understand that. But unfortunately, dentistry is a business too, right? I mean, for the most part, dentists are running businesses. And so they kind of have to walk this line where they are providing treatment, they are providing good, valuable care to these patients, but you do have to balance that with making sure that the business side, that the money side is also taken care of. And that's absolutely doable. It's possible with, say it with me, systems. Yes. And I can understand that, but it's also why people, I think, like us exist professionally, because I think that something that works really well is letting that care and that patient experience exist in the office, but taking some of those processes, like laying the structure out in the office and then taking some of the actual like collections processes out of the office and letting them run kind of independent of the office in a way. But many of those, of the success of that happens when the structure is laid in the office. So that's really important.
Yeah, because I think we all, meaning those of us that, you know, have found our way to dentistry, maybe a little bit more specifically in the front desk where it's like heavily patient interacting position. We naturally want to please. We want to be pleasant. We want to make our patients feel good. It's a little bit of a customer service, you know, position, honestly. And when you're thinking about customer service, you're not thinking about collections, right? That's not what you're thinking about. We're thinking about making our patients feel good, letting them have a really pleasant interaction in our office, you know. And so when someone is concerned about the cost of something or worried about it, maybe even upset or angry, our natural inclination can be to reassure them that it's going to be okay. We want to diffuse the situation, to redirect, you know, just to avoid that discomfort.
Yeah. And I think especially I've seen it happen a lot of times where whether a patient that you're speaking to is upset in a like a sad way, that they're concerned about like, how am I going to pay this bill? Or they're upset in like an angry way where they are aggressive. They're, you know, unhappy that they owe a bill, which I would be too. I feel
Right.
you. You on the person who's on the receiving end of it, there is an inclination to avoid it. You want to make it better. You want to offer a solution to it, right? And if it's in your power, sometimes it might be, let me talk to somebody. Let me resubmit this claim. Let me see what I can do, right? And the problem is, though, is that avoidance and that reluctance to have like a tough conversation where you just sort of sit and you say, well, wait a second, hold on. We're in this. This balance is owed, and let's just sit and kind of talk about it. It kind of kicks off a chain reaction that if that sort of avoidance is established at the very beginning of the patient office interaction, it creates a lack of a clear upfront communication about financial expectations. And I really feel like that's the root of a lot of this kind of what we're talking about today, which is, you know, collections without resentment. And I think that if potential financial obligations are made clear at the very beginning and everybody goes into this treatment with their eyes wide open about what they could potentially be paying, so much resentment and could be not only avoided, but like collections could be made so much easier right down the line. Yeah. But again, there's this inclination to say, but don't worry about it. Like we'll take care of it. We're going to take care of you, you know? Yeah. And it's like, I need you to not do that. I need you to sit with this and really make sure that everybody understand, you know, give the patient the benefit of the doubt and tell them, you know, what they could be paying, what we're looking at, what you are prepared to do for them in order to try to get reimbursement from the insurance company, right? But what could happen if it doesn't happen? And, you know, and then hopefully set them up for success that way. So, yeah, I just think that that's kind of, it starts there at the beginning.
Yeah, because patients want, and honestly, your successful, consistent collections process really depends on the clarity and the predictability, not avoidance and surprise.
Yeah, because if patients are surprised by a balance, whether it's shortly after a treatment plan is signed or months after a treatment is rendered, it's the system that failed. It's not the patient, it's the system that failed.
100%. So what works then?
So, as with nearly everything in a dental office, consistent, clear systems solve nearly every problem. I cannot.
I'm sensing a theme. Are we going to hear this in every podcast?
I'm a broken record, so yes, probably. The first part is an upfront financial conversation that has to happen in the same way every single time. Literally, I kind of joke that when I speak to patients that you could probably record me and make like a soundboard of me that you just play different parts and it would probably work, honestly. So I think number one would be financial policies should be introduced, obviously, before treatment starts. Easy, simple language. Not just insurance jargon, not just like checking boxes that afterwards you can say, oh, but it was on there. You want to make sure the patient understands. Signed financial agreements help avoid contact later, but I would go beyond that. I would absolutely make sure that, I think everybody's familiar with, you walk into the office, you're handed a clipboard, patient goes, they look at it, they sign it, right?
Yeah.
That's all well and good.
But they're looking for like the spots they need to fill out, right? They're
Absolutely.
looking for, where do I have to sign? Where do you need my initials? Yeah. Here's my birthday. They're not necessarily reading every word on there.
No, definitely not. And I think that it would behoove everybody involved in this process that if the patient is going to be going forward with any kind of treatment, that somebody take the time to speak with this patient, right? That you have some kind of process in place where this patient, where you actually put your finger on those papers and you show them. So here's our financial policy, right? So we are going to be sending these claims as a courtesy to you. Our office is considered out of network for your plan or in network for your plan. You get nothing. You get nothing if the patient is not clear about this, right? It's such a short-term gain for not pointing this out. So point it out. Tell them that you're going to be sending this as a courtesy. Tell them what it means that you are out of network, but that means that you get to choose whoever you get to go see. If it's a PPO, and that means that, reimbursement is going to be XYZ, and we're gonna, there's wording that you get to use that can be creative and truthful and really make it so the patient understands that they're making a good choice to come see you. And
then you're being upfront. That makes people feel good. Like absolutely. You might think that, oh my gosh, I have to tell them they owe money, and nobody likes that. Yeah. But specifically saying to them, we are going to do the best we can to get the most we can from your insurance. However, like you've heard before, this is always just an estimate. So if something comes back, we'll explain to you why it came back that way and why it is still owed. But this is not necessarily your final bill. Your final amount isn't necessarily what we're saying here. This is as close to what we can get as an estimate as possible, but it's not necessarily written in stone.
Absolutely. That's the first part, our upfront financial conversations.
Yeah. So I would say number 2 would be proactive billing. So send clean claims quickly. Follow up regularly with insurance. Don't let those balances sit for 90 days plus. Like, one of the things that we use here at SD Dental Solutions is a Trello checklist, honestly. Like, we just have so many moving parts and so many clients and so many different tasks that we're doing each day that it becomes difficult for us to kind of keep in line, So we make, like you said, Sarah, we make a really good system where we have daily things, we have weekly things, we have monthly things, so on and so forth. So, maybe make yourself a checklist, or maybe use your Outlook calendar. But just make a system that is a proactive billing. And what I mean by that is, every single time a patient walks out, batch that claim. Or when you're doing the whole, it depends on obviously your practice management software, but get into a really good system in office for you check patient in, you explain to them their financial, responsibility, and then they go back, and then they come back to you again, and you walk them out, and you tell them to have a good day, you tell them when their next appointment is, whatever it may be. But at that point, behind the desk, the part that they don't see, that's when you want to make sure that you're posting those procedures, you're walking those patients out. And maybe you can't do it every single time the patient leaves. Maybe you have a different system where you take that pile of route slips and you do it every day at the end of the day. But you want to make sure, if you're seeing patients today, those claims are already batched by tomorrow morning. Don't let them sit. Don't forget about those, because it's so easy. If you don't get them into the practice management software, there's nothing to track that. It's so easy to just let that money walk out the door. So have a really good proactive billing system where you're sending clean claims, meaning everything you've double checked. If you listen to our last our last podcast, we talked about double checking those dates of birth and the subscriber ID and all that. So send those claims clean, follow up regularly with insurance. Don't let those balances sit for 90 plus days before you take action. And then the second part of that is follow up on those older balances. You have to be consistent and persistent patient AR follow-up process that patients understand and anticipate. So again, here we go again with this thing, right? You want a system where you are following up systematically. Your patients will actually start to learn how you do it. It's usually I come in and then a couple months later I get a bill, and then if I don't pay that bill a couple months later, they send me a letter. They will get used to what you're basically training them how
I
your
very
process
lovingly
works.
call it training your patients.
Yeah, you're training your patients really how kind of your process works, and then they will come to expect that the same time every time. And if you stay on your system, then your patients are not surprised that a bill is coming, or they're not surprised that, something is owed the next time they come in, whatever your system may be. So, you need to actively communicate with your patients about balances as they come into the office. Don't let those old balances get older and longer. Make sure you're communicating when they come into the office that they do have a past balance. And better yet, get a system where you're sending, consistent monthly statements that they expect, even if there's still claims pending. We highly recommend that you still send a statement when there's a claim pending.
Absolutely.
But change the note on it. Change the note on it and train your patients to read the notes on their statements. So the note at the bottom could say, you have a claim pending. This is just for your information purpose, FYI. And they'll start to be trained kind of to read those notes at the bottom of their statement too. So they always know where their balance is, or what the standing of their account is. We don't want them to have surprises.
I had mentioned earlier that these processes are vital to have in your system, and that I think that it makes sense that the front would be handling like patient experience. These kinds of things can be taken out of the office, right? They don't have to be. You can have somebody dedicated in your office to doing this. So following up on these claims, sending these statements, right? Following up on your AR, and being as consistent as you absolutely need to be in order to be successful at this. So if that's the route that you choose to go, offices are successful at that all the time. There are other options to take this out of the office and have a company like ours do it. It's extremely successful, and I think that it's the way to go. We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't think that this was the way to go. So the bottom line, though, is what we're trying to get across. These processes are, without a doubt, necessary. Like, you have to be doing these things on a regular basis. So what goes hand in hand with these things is scripts and training for staff. So along with these processes, love scripts. And when I say scripts, it doesn't have to sound like robotic. Like, you can just get really familiar with the concepts and the talking points that you need to make sure that these patients understand. What are the obligations that they could potentially be paying? What are estimates? What does that mean, right? Sending a claim to an insurance, how does that process work? So it's helpful to kind of workshop the best way of saying it and getting comfortable with it, so you can say it to a patient like that every single time, right? And you just get very efficient with your words. And so you say it to them in a fast way that makes sense, and they get it. And then you really get it too. So you know what you're saying and you're connected to it. And then you can answer questions. So again, highly suggest that you say the same thing the same way all the time, and then repeat. I'm going to repeat it a lot. And I really think that it's empowering to have scripts, to make sure that your staff understands what they're saying. I really think that, again, this whole topic is to avoid resentment, right? And I think that something that we know is that when patients call us, they are not calling us because they're stoked, right? Like, they are not stoked to talk to me, and I am very well aware of this. So I have learned over the years that when a patient is calling and talking to me, it is not about me. It's not about me. It's about them. It's about the situation. They're not happy, right? Somewhere along the way, the system broke down.
Yeah.
There is a misunderstanding.
They're surprised. They're surprised know why they have this bill.
And whether it's that the office didn't explain it, right? Whether the patient didn't hear it. Maybe the office did a great job explaining it, and the patient just didn't hear it. That's absolutely, the patient's just disappointed in this situation, right? But like, you have to believe that you're here to help them, that you are in a situation, and the way to do that is to not avoid it. You have to stand on 10 toes down and stare, and talk to this patient and say, I am here to help you. I really want to help you. What can I do for you right now? I hear that you're upset. Let's talk about where we're at right now. So it looks like we billed your insurance. Your plan covered 50%. Your portion is the remaining 50%. How can we keep moving forward? And they might be mad, and they might, what I call, energy at you, and they're going to energy at you. But like, you have to just, again, genuinely believe that you are there to help them. And don't get me wrong, right? I'm not advocating that you take shit. I'm not advocating that you take abuse. I'm not advocating that you do any of that, because I tell my staff all the time, you don't have to take it, and you do not have to talk to people that abuse you, and you don't have to do that. But I also do have sympathy for people that genuinely are upset and caught off guard and are facing a bill that they potentially do not feel that they can pay. And I think it goes a long way when your tone is there for them and you just hear them out, and that's a part of that customer experience, thing that you were talking about. And that's kind of what we exist for, so that the office can concentrate on that patient experience and the care, and we can deal with the money part of it, right? And so let your tone, and if they're in front of you, let your body language convey that you are here to help. Also acknowledging that you are a human being and you also get the care and help that you need to, because sometimes it is a lot. And if you get energied at, know that you need to go release that energy to somebody else too. So go tell somebody about your experience, like after it happens. It really helps, because I've been there before. I have been yelled at more times than your average human being, I think, oddly doing this. So,
I actually I can share a personal experience here. And it's HIPAA compliant because it's me deciding to share.
Yeah.
But, we had when my kids were younger, we had a pediatrics that we, started taking the kids to, and we really loved them. I mean, the kids loved the dentist and everybody in there. They're so sweet and nice. They had some fillings, and we were told what we were supposed to pay, and we paid that. And then after the kids got the fillings, we got a bill. And, I do dental billing. So I was like, babe, to my husband, like, what is this bill from? Because he had taken him in, and he's like, well, I don't know, that I paid when I went in there. So I was like, well, let me look. And what it was actually was like anesthesia or something, like, because they're younger, but it was like $99 each, and I think that one of my kids had like 2 fillings and my other had 1, so it was like $300 that we owed. And I was like, what in the actual, like, I was upset because we had already paid for like our patient portion and stuff, right? So,
and you weren't anticipating it. It was a surprise.
I wasn't anticipating it at all. And of course my husband took the kids in, so he didn't know what to fully ask, but they had told him what he should pay, and he paid it. And then later on, we had to pay for these anesthesia. Which, here's the thing. I was so annoyed because it's not $25. It was $300, but at the same time, if they had told me, or even my husband or whatever at the time, like, hey, they're going to need this. They're 4 and 5 years old, or however old they were at the time. We would not have said, and some parents might, but we would not have said, no, don't help my kid feel the most comfortable that they can feel.
Absolutely not.
We just would have been able to budget a little bit better. And I think that is like that's exactly what we're talking about.
It's a perfect example.
Specific example.
And the reason that's such a perfect example is because you are still thinking about that experience. 10 years later, a decade later, right? Yeah. And you're also, like, that's something that sticks with you. If you had been a different person, that could have resulted in a hit to their reputation, right? Sure. You could have made you could have flat out refused to pay it, right? And that office would have then gone, okay, what do? Do we send you to collections? Do we die on this hill? Do we write it off? You could have written a bad review talking about your experience,
that's
right?
What I was going to say. Like, how many times have we seen dental offices with bad reviews? And those, if you actually go in and look at reviews, A lot of times those reviews are actually, they don't know what they're doing financially.
That's right.
They
That's
don't
right.
know how to send claims. It's very commonly not about the doctor or the
That's
actual
right.
people. It's about the processes in the
Yeah.
office.
That's right.
So,
And so no, it's a perfect example. It genuinely, and like so our collections communication best practices, I would say,
yeah.
is
I was
number
gonna say,
one.
let's recap those big takeaways like
Yeah,
we always do.
for sure. So I would say collections communication best practices. Number one, I would start light and friendly. I would always assume goodwill. In fact, one thing that we like to do is we like to go, hey, looks like we've sent you some stuff. I don't know if you've gotten it. Like, I like to give them a little bit of again, the benefit of the doubt, right? Like, we are not a collections agency. So I like to just start light, assume goodwill, don't like to come after people hard. People respond better that way, right? And then also use multiple methods. So I do, again, we're on behalf of the office. So email, and as long as the patient has opted into these things, text, email, mailed statements, we're really trying to make sure that we are reaching out to the patient and asking them, are you aware of this balance? Is there anything that we can do to help you answer these questions? So the tone,
if you guys have weave or anything,
that's right.
Definitely utilize that.
Absolutely.
Make sure you're HIPAA compliant with all of this, of course.
Absolutely. That's right. And escalate the tone only after several soft touch points, right? So a high recommend for me would be, don't ever make the patient feel like you are quote unquote shaking them down. That is, kind of, you don't want a patient to say like, I didn't even get anything from you, right? You want that patient to be able to say, you want to be able to tell them, well, it looks like we've reached out here and here and here and here. I would so much rather err on the side of being generous with those opportunities to, communicate than just kind of jumping straight to, that's my opinion. Other offices can have different opinions, but that's my opinion.
Exactly, because the whole point of doing this is not to just get the money and not have that patient. The point is to kindly get what's owed to the office, get what's owed to the doctor, but keep and retain that patient. So we don't want them to feel like they're getting shaken down, or they're in a process where it's like, oh, they've escalated to their billing company or something like that, So so definitely, like, don't escalate until, like Sara said, several touch points, like very friendly reach out in many different ways. I prefer text. I do not answer my phone. When somebody calls me, I do not answer my phone. So text or email works better for me.
Absolutely.
I never check the mail either, but my husband does every day, so mail statements might work for him. Everybody has a different preferred method of communication, so try all of them.
In fact, so an example of a very gentle 3-step process that we could offer you if you don't have one right now. So the first thing we might do is a gentle reminder. It could either be text, email, or a very nice letter that you send in the mail. It could be all three of these things if you give it a try, but it could just be a reminder about your remaining balance of X amount of dollars. Very gentle, very nice. This is probably after maybe a couple of statements that you've sent. The next step would be a phone call. I would recommend a phone call saying, hey, LaRae, just wanted to make sure that you'd been receiving the correspondence that we've been sending. Looks like we've sent some statements, a letter, we've sent you a text. Don't know if you've been receiving those, right? Again, nice and light tone.
But leave a message too, because,
absolutely
if they don't
leave a message.
They may not answer because they just don't know who it is. So if you leave a message,
right.
They're going to listen to it and they'll be like, oh shoot. And they'll just get right online and pay your bill, ideally.
That's right. And then ultimately after those, that third step in this round would be a more formal notice. So at that point, I would probably send some kind of letter that says, this is your reminder that, this is officially due, and I would give perhaps a deadline. We do need to hear from you within 10 days. You're probably going to give them more time, but a lot of times giving them a bit of a deadline sometimes does inspire somebody to give you a call back, right? Yeah. So I would probably repeat that process maybe 2 or 3 times, but that's just an example. Again, other offices might have different things that work for them, but this is a bit of a process that we could offer to you that might work. If you don't have something right now, give this a shot, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then remember always to maintain humanity. People aren't just balances. So you know, treat them like people. They're not
Yeah.
just a balance. Like I said earlier, you're wanting to retain these patients. So we're not
Yes.
shaking anybody down, right? And
Absolutely.
honestly, an angry patient, they can be costly, like we said, in
Yes.
terms of the time it takes to deal with that patient, to discuss it internally between, you know, coworkers, and maybe going to your doctor and saying, what do I do about this? Adjustments that might need to be made, the ill will that you'll lose.
Yeah.
And like Sara said, you know, the potential bad reviews or reputational damage that you might sustain, even if you do write off the balance.
Yeah.
So you could, in the end, end up writing that balance off, losing a patient and getting a bad review. And that is obviously worst case scenario. But I will be honest, it's not something I haven't seen. So, you know, all that stuff needs to be remembered.
So, and remember, managing your collections is part of taking care of your patients. It's just like preventative care. It really is. Like, set clear expectations early, follow up with kindness, and stay consistent. And you're going to protect your revenue, and you're also going to protect your relationships. And you are going to, I've seen it happen. I literally see it happen every single day, that you are going to be able to maintain high collections, and you're not going to have that resentment. So our call to action to you guys for this week is to absolutely audit your collection system. Again, be honest about where you are right now. Do you have a collections system? Do you have one? Are you doing it regularly? Are you doing it consistently?
And check in with your staff too. You need to know what's happening in your office. So observe patient interactions on the phone and in person. Did they appear comfortable, or is it consistent? You know, talk to them. Did they feel supported? Does your office staff feel supported? These are really important questions because as we've discussed today, a huge part of your successful AR process will involve your in-office staff being engaged and methodical about explaining potential financial responsibilities and following up on those old balances.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad we got to talk about this today. And on the next week's episode, we are going to visit one of our favorite subjects. It's honestly probably the cornerstone of our organization. It's extremely important in billing and collections. It's not talked about nearly often enough. LaRae and I talk about it all the time. So I'm really excited to talk about it for a little while. And so on the next episode, we're going to discuss ethical billing. It isn't just a buzzword, what it means to do billing the right way and why it matters for your reputation and your revenue.
Yeah, love that topic. Can't wait to talk about it next week. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you guys.
We'll hope you'll tune in next week. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.